To discuss all of this, let's bring in Albert Cahn, New York chapter legal director for the Council on American Islamic Relations. Albert, let's start with the attack in London. Police are calling it deliberate. You agree?
Yes, the evidence thus far shows that this was a purposeful, planned, deliberate attack to try and wound and even kill members of the Muslim community.
So does this Finsbury Park attack now play into the hands of those Muslim extremists that are planning further attacks on vulnerable people in the UK?
I think any time that we see people being attacked in the streets because of their faith, it plays into the worst narratives amongst all communities. And certainly that is always a fear when you see this sort of just horrific scene unfolding on the streets of London.
The attacker has been identified, and apparently he lived right next to some devout Muslims who said that they were shocked that here's somebody who apparently has so much Muslim hatred, but how could he live next to a Muslim family? Is it possible that this was somebody who went crazy, that this really wasn't a purposeful attack on Muslims?
I think we have to be very careful because there appears to be a double standard when attacks are carried out by Muslim individuals and when attacks are targeted at Muslim individuals. When it's a white attacker, we're usually quick to look towards mental illness, towards their individual variables. We never ask, who radicalized him? What was the driving ideology? We use a different lens, but this attack shows that an attack based off of political motives is terrorism, no matter who the attacker is.
And certainly the British government has referred to it as such. Now, some in the UK and in the US as well are saying that there are certain mosques and Muslim centers that are believed to radicalize, to incite violence, and they're calling for monitoring of those mosques. What do you think about that?
I think we're very quick to intrude and erode the civil liberties of marginalized communities, and we're never willing to apply the same standard to the rest of the community.
Would that be intruding? Would that be marginalizing if there is some kind of presence at centers that have a past of inciting violence and have a past of radical Islam? To have intelligence officers there, you think that that would be problematic?
I mean, without having the exact proposal, I can't say if that precise action would be. What I know is this: when in the United States, where we see that 71% of attacks are carried out by right-wing extremists and white supremacists, the anti-terror focus is always on the Muslim community. In the UK, I suspect that is disproportionate as well. And we have to be careful that when we talk about terrorism, when we talk about security, that we don't use that as a code word for a single community. Terrorism is terrorism, no matter who is attacking.
But isn't it fair to say that terrorism has essentially lost its meaning because it's been bastardized in so many different ways, in so many different fashions, that if somebody labels it a terrorist attack, that doesn't really provide us with much guidance as to what really happened, does it?
I think it still is an important legal standard. Here in the United States and in the UK, there are different laws that govern attacks based off of political motives that qualify as terrorism. There are enhanced penalties. There are enhanced surveillance tools. There is a real legal meaning to these words. And in the United States, when we see the counterterrorism apparatus almost exclusively targeted at Muslim individuals, it clearly has a disproportionate and chilling effect on their ability to practice their faith.
We haven't just called Muslims terrorists. I mean, Timothy McVeigh, you could go through the list of all the number of, white separatists that we've accused of terrorism in the United States.
But still, take New York City, for example. 95% of our intelligence division investigations are into Muslim-affiliated groups and Muslim individuals, despite the fact that the vast majority of attackers are not Muslim. Again and again, we see this pattern of discriminatory focus on the Muslim community, not because the risk is there, but because the narrative is there. And that is why it is important to use that label of terrorism equally across the board.
Well, terrorism, by the dictionary definition, is an act of violence against civilians to promote a political or ideological cause.
Yes.
So it has been applied in both instances. Now, Albert, I want to draw your attention to, again, back to the situation in the UK. I understand you represent the US. But there have been about 400 British Muslims who went to fight in Syria and in Mosul, believed to have joined ISIS fighters, and they are now coming back to the UK. Do you think that people like that should be screened, that there should be stricter vetting processes before they are allowed back into the UK?
These terms, stricter vetting, screening, they always sound good in the abstract, but the question is, what is the baseline process, and is it doing a good enough job? And what is the cost of making it stricter? We don't, today, we don't know.
The cause is that these people have visited Syria and Mosul and are believed to have partaken in some kind of struggle with ISIS.
But for example, the Home Office already has extensive powers to monitor such individuals, to screen such individuals. What is today defective about those mechanisms? What today is insufficient about those tools? We can't always say every time there's a threat that we need to ratchet up the amount of scrutiny, ratchet up the harms to our civil rights, or nothing will be left. It always has to be a question of why is this necessary? And I don't think the fact that there's a threat is enough. You have to say that the current tools are insufficient.
Albert Cahn is the legal director for the Council on American Islamic Relations. Albert, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.